So I came into the show a week ago and just realized like the works have so much presence and potency and vibrancy, and they really just kind of changed the way I got out of the BART station when I was back in San Francisco and was walking home and realized that like it was just completely changing the way that I was seeing what was around me. Muzae, you were talking about the way that that Ashley Fleet painting back there by Chuno, the little worlds that those shapes create. And I was looking up on the side of the building and how some of the outdoor painting there was related to some of Alicia's work. And then I passed by a storefront and Martha, there were those really odd mannequins that are just for necklaces and work. Yeah. Anyway, there were some of those on 24th Street, and I was just like, wow, everything. It all felt connected. But it's really great again to be with you this morning. I think Muzae, you and I started looking at painting together, and I think maybe 2017 when we were at school in the T. Stephen Farm show at SFMOMA, and it was just such a it was so fun to look at work together.
I mean, it's like a core memory for me. So yeah, it was definitely a little bit more than just fun for me. Yeah, it was like so it was really cool for me.
Super cool. And then I first saw your work in the staff art show where they were like based back in officers, and I think the first time I did a Zoom studio visit ever was with Sarah Robertson Big, but I sound like there's the first few months into it. Like that didn't about that right. Yeah. And it's amazing where I was in Project for Food that year. Alicia, I've been looking at your work for a long time, mostly in the context of missions. Like shows and Arrow's incredible gallery presentation because it's wonderful to see your work at SFMOMA as part of the SICA exhibition and the sugar thing. So it's nice to feel. And Marma, I'm meeting for the first time today, and so I'm really I absolutely love those paintings that you have in this whole adjacent space. But I would love to maybe start by just talking about how this came together. How I've had generations of artists came together to present these computing objects. Cute, right?
Should I talk about that first?
Talk as much as you want.
You're gonna regret that. Yeah, thanks everyone for coming. I guess to answer that first question about how this came together, I feel it was just really, really natural. Alicia has been a friend and someone that I look up to in so many different ways that I just felt like the works, regardless of what was made, were going to converse with each other in this space and really be able to create this really interesting natural dialogue that just kind of imitates the natural dialogue that we have in real life. So for this room specifically, I thought it was really cool how thinking about the paintings as these entities that we put so much energy into, and now they get to hang out and converse with each other using that same energy. And in the other spaces, getting to know Martha's work, I really think about, Alicia talks about this triangle a lot in this work, and ever since you mentioned that, I just keep thinking about this triangle and these pivot points, and I kind of see that a lot in your work too, in general. I think of this big red as connecting all the works together, all the shows, and just really meshing everything in all the three spaces together. And I really do feel like, Alicia, you're kind of that pivot point in the triangle, but I guess the whole point of the triangle is at all that same point. But you know, yeah. So yeah, so long story short, like I do think everything came together super naturally, and yeah, it feels really good to see the kind of energy that the works like create by being in space with each other.
And you took it way back, right?
Yes. Martha and I met when I was 18 because my very first love and only boyfriend is her oldest son, Virgil. And we met, Virgil and I met at Humboldt State, and then, yeah, the whole Shaw family really pivotally changed my life forever. I mean,
It's
it's how I met Ruby Neri was through Virgil, and how I wound up at the Art Institute, and Harold Fletcher was actually a friend of ours back, I mean, still is, but part of that kind of Humboldt State clan. And Martha, I've been like a huge fan of Martha's work from the very first time that I saw it. And yeah, it did come together organically, and I think for me it was like the first time that I'd ever been asked like by Brock to kind of think about or rationalize like when Muzae and I or Martha, and I realized like I literally never done that before in my life. Like that, to me, that's like somebody else's job, you know, like my job is to make for work. And I don't know how my free person shows, or it is kind of a really situation, but so yeah, I think with the triangle thing, I see it kind of like rotating constantly, and I think the commonality is, you sort of pointed on it, is for the three of us, in my mind, is where the work is sourced from. And that's sort of like seeing things, or noticing things, or kind of fixating on things that you fixate on. You know what I mean? That aren't, and then sort of interpreted three different individual ways. So I see a lot of connection between their work and our work and our work, and so so yeah, it's kind of a dream come true for me. I mean, I've never shown with either one of them, and how it all just kind of came to be was, it makes a lot of sense to me, and it makes me happy, and in a kind of confusing, you know, sort of global world and art world in general. So, yeah, I'm still.
one of the things that strikes me about the work is that it all feels like it has a real connection to the place, you know, even in abstraction, you know, it's like you say, you know, your work, you know, has it's very personal, and you know, connects to places that are meaningful to you, and memories. You know, and Alicia's been like connected to an urban situation. And I was struck by the fact that you know, I feel so much human presence in all of the work without actually seeing people anywhere. And
yeah, I mean, that's amazing hearing that come from you, because that's pretty much what I strive for in making work. I think of the work as very social. You know, I studied sociology. I think of myself as a sociologist, and everything, all the paintings, I'm like constantly working out some sort of social relation to the space, and with myself, with other people. And I often say that I try to create social paintings without the person. like that wants to allow that space for the viewer. So yeah, and the way that we all connect, it's like that triangle space. So like where in a spatial sense, maybe I'm like more of that pivot of like how I develop space is similar, I think, to more like how Alicia composed a painting, and then the subject of this like looking at everything around and bringing that into the work is a lot like Martha's work that I've noticed. I really like how we're both kind of even like struck on like books, and there's like these similar kind of motifs and a similar idea to the things that inspire us to be. Like with Alicia, I love composing with two-dimensional flat planes of color, and I think that can open up this like vibrant world, and that's kind of something that I see you do, and really respect how you approach that same kind of idea of composing with those colors.
Yeah, but then it's funny because I think it could be like accessibility, you know, when you're talking about the viewer, like the viewer's human in the painting. That's where the figure comes in, which is amazing. And for me, accessibility is more about mark making and it's sort of flattening that kind of hierarchy of what is something and not, and sort of compliment and insult can kind of button in. So it's like, again, it has to do with the viewer, but in an actual mason sort of way. And it being very sort of just basic and simple or democratic, that, you know, each line is sort of the same. They're all their own color, you know, so yeah, interesting. And again, even with Martha, like, sorry.
I'm What's that?
No.
Oh, Mark, I would love if you might just share a little bit about your imagery and what we're seeing in the paintings, the flowers and the fish, you know, seascapes and just fun. I use my images as just an excuse to get to someplace else. I don't really think of my image as an image. Living visually pleases me, but there's something else I'm trying to get to. Is anything more you can say about what you're struggling with? Yeah, I'll just use mannequins as an example. But I don't like anecdote in my art. But if there was, I would say, it's kind of funny that I would paint something that is used to display something. And I think a mannequin is kind of grotesque. There's no head. But it's displaying something that's lovely and pretentious at the same time. I think kind of difference between those two things. You're a little weird, don't you know?
Yeah, like a little weird. They're a little weird. They don't. The boats are like a journey. This is all a journey, right?
Yeah, I really relate to that way of kind of fixating on is interesting relationships that you can kind of make in your mind about objects and places and games, and really using that to guide the work and guide the exploration while painting. So like kind of how you're talking about the mannequins being like grotesque, but also displaying beauty and this kind of it's hypocritical in this way, or kind of has all this duality to it. I really feel that way about like all the objects and things that I fixate on and bring to paintings. That like fencing and ornate fencing being beautiful, but also this like very brutal way of protecting and saving space. I mean, this is my house, don't enter. Like the shape of the tents, like easy up pop-up tents, and I just feel like there's such a vast world of possibilities that you could put underneath that tent, and it's like this claim of space, and you can have your own little store or sell food or really just do whatever you want. And in that space, it's kind of like how I think of practice in general, is like just this open window to putting up the pieces that you want to put in there and talking about the things you want to talk about, and like taking your thoughts forward in this visual practice type of way. So yeah, I really relate to that kind of way of image making.
But I think we all just love painting too.
Yeah.
So because like that to me, like I talk more shop, like we've done so much material shop talk, like so many people, yeah. And it's, not to be forgotten that that's the ultimate way that you have to get through to something. And I think that's sort of the ultimate fixation too. Is like, that's what I'm thinking about when you're saying it's like an excuse to, it's like a lifelong commitment, just working with the simple materials that I've been working with for so long. It's still this like, there's still like a hunger, like you're just never satiated. It's never, and I mean, we talk about this whole like we just see just like you just see sort of like in the end result you just see what's lacking, like, or at least for me, I really have a hard time just living with the work once it's finished, but because it's just sort of an irritant. But like in the studio, I'm not like thinking about like, what is that? I'm trying to get my mind as far away from that as possible and just focus on the actual physicality of the paint and the color and the composition. And it was neat to make work in the context of both of these people because, again, I sort of just thought about like color, size, kind of imagery to some extent. But really, it kind of all started with, I would say more so in the room that Martha and I share, rather than because I completely agree with Muzae. I feel like I always trusted without knowing that our work would figure its way out. And then there was like this weird chemical thing that. And I mean, not only just your own image, but just like how things like suddenly you're like, oh yeah, they were kind of like meant to be next to each other in a weird way. But
yeah.
So yeah. Anyway, I just think we all are thinking.
Yeah. I mean, like even more so than just the materials that we're using throughout our lives, throughout history. I'm very fixated with this. I'm very fixated on the surface. How these are all squares, and there's something so mundane, and I mean just in painting in general. Just painting in general, we're all just on these two-dimensional squares and at various sizes, and that I think the fact that we can sit in a room with a blank canvas and project or not even project or just, I don't even know, there's not even a word for it. It's just like I'm projecting, but I'm also receiving and just like transmuting.
Making it flat.
Making it flat. I mean, that's something that I'm really serious about, is that I want to be really true to the dimensionality of the surface. So using two-dimensional planes of color, like very flat. to create a third skewed dimension of your choosing, kind of. It's very fascinating to me to read something as a third dimension when we all know that it's not. And it's a lie. It's all two-dimension. But
I disagree.
well, it's not a lie because I'm truthful about its dimensionality, I think. But I just find it really interesting that, in this type of love and painting, that we're all just kind of communicating on the same surface level. And one more thing. I think this room specifically, brings that out in my work, because typically, I work very thematically and in a series, and I'm thinking about social things that I just thought were interesting and thought I should express in some sort of way. And all these paintings here are kind of standalone paintings that don't necessarily have a series companion. They're just things I wanted to make, or just things that I was fixated on and just wanted to do. Like the boat painting, I just drew it out and I was like, this is good, I want to make it. Bop, bop, bop. Here it is, and now we're all in this room.
I would love it if each of you could just talk a little bit about how you get from an idea to to a painting. So Martha, for instance, are you looking at objects in your studio to do images or things coming out of your head? Do you drawings? How does the canvas turn into a boat or a fish? A painting of a
It's mostly I just like looking at things and hours and I have to make it myself.
And in looking at things, do you do setups in the studio, or I see my Nancy is Catherine as well, and we worked on the Joan Brown exhibition together, and Nancy discovered that Joan Brown kept frozen fish in her refrigerator that she didn't pull out just to paint from, and then they would go back in the refrigerator and refreeze. You have a shark in your refrigerator?
I found one and I cleaned it out. And it turns out it had been there for 26 years.
Did you paint it?
Did it into the garden? The story?
Yes.
I buried it under my corn with the Indians. It was freeze dried and it didn't rot. And then I dug up my corn in the springtime and shark came up. Anything else you want to know?
So if you're painting the fish that you have next door, is that then coming out of your memory of what a fish look like?
Actually, my husband made some ceramic fish. And so we had a lot of pictures of fish around everything. Okay, I stole it from you, Richard.
Give us a wave, Richard.
We had a show together once, and we don't like to title our shows, but we called it Cross-Contamination. And so we just have these pictures of fish around. I drew them. We did that.
And Alicia, you're returning to. You're returning to forms and patterns and things. Repeatedly. There's a. I guess in contrast to the way Muzae works, mostly in her series, there's recognizable sort of images, leaves and double rainbows or whatever you might call them that have this enduring fascination. I'm just curious about sort of what so what draws you to sort of to go back again and again?
I don't know.
I really don't know. I don't know. I mean, all the work sort of functions the same to me. It's just color and shape sort of interlocking and, you know, to kind of create something a little bit more than the individual. And I mean, again, the work for me is kind of essential in my sanity. So I think that's part of it. The desire, the need to kind of just be repetitive, and but again, all the work is just the same metaphor. Whereas, and it's funny talking about these kind of white square spaces. I mean, that is actually kind of new for me, and I spent a couple decades sort of avoiding that sort of face-off, and I think that's part of what drew me to just working on found surfaces for so long, and still do. But it poses its own challenge where it's not something that like with the found, even with the, I mean, I started painting on canvas and I haven't done that in probably 30 years, you know. So things like I rejected ages ago, I'm now sort of more intrigued by. And the found objects kind of pose their own limitations in that it really was sort of like, I always describe it like me and the thing kind of have to figure out what is gonna happen, even though it ends up looking the same all the time. For you guys, and for me too, but they're all kind of different and have their own personality, and it's just something I have to do. So, I don't know. I mean, I think the biggest stretch for me are these kind of chalk pieces, just in the imagery and also just in the material. It's like I'm very humbled by that material, and I also, like the chalk because it's faster in some ways. It just sometimes I just want to get something done in a day, and kind of as opposed to like it taking a month, And I love both processes. It's just So I'm sure I didn't answer a question, but
just one thing. You said that they're all kind of part of the same metaphor, and I was just wondering if you might, elaborate on that a little bit.
I thought I did, but it's all, again, it's just these very simple, and they're all hand mixed. They all come from, I use the same size brush, They all kind of have their own personality and do their own thing, and I feel like that's, I don't love every part of it. It's just a metaphor for life. It's like, I love one color and line 1 minute, and an hour later it's the one that drives me nuts. So it's just kind of, I don't know, it's very just sort of, it's like condensed, I guess. It's sort of just like condensing everything. Like that's how I see these, like just very dense and sort of like in a certain mood. I can see it as like sort of a lot of space around it, and sometimes I just see it as like being crushed by everything around you.
Muzae, so when we saw each other the other day, you were mentioning that you tend to start with drawings and sort things out that way, and then the process or the materials are pretty unforgiving, so you have to have things pretty well worked out, as we
Yeah, I think that's specific to the oil pastel weekend. Yeah, which I've really have started to dive into a lot more, especially with this series that's on the other room. So I'm to do full oil pastel paintings. It's pretty stressful. It goes against all of my urges for this meticulous straight line. If you're familiar with anything I've done in the past, you might see this really sharp line that I was really concerned about. I have it in this tape, and actually I still use it a lot. But
is it mainly down in the right hand?
Yeah. So it's that's a vinyl emulsion paint, and I have to plan that whole section out because I'm using oil and water based on the same surface. But basically, the oil pastel just becomes, it pushes the practice to be more of a cooperative experience of I need to continuously check in with the work, and I feel it humanizes the work for me in the practice that way. I often think I personify everything. I personify paintings, I personify the objects in the paintings, I personify the entire practice itself, and I think of my practice as a relationship. And like any relationship, you kind of have to let it also tell you what's going on and let the work navigate you in the next moves. And I really love using oil pastel because one, I love the vibrancy of the pigment. Also, it's so unforgiving that it makes me sit and live with my decisions, which is psycho and causes a lot of grief in the studio.
Very flaring.
Yeah. If you make a wrong move, it just stares at you in high frequency until you do something about it, and then you're kind of oh my god, what's going on? But yeah, I think the practice, like you were saying, kind of emulates life like that. It's the thing that gives me solace in my practice is knowing that it's forever in a way, or at least as long as I'm gonna live. I just never see myself not having a creative practice, and I don't know why I would ever not have that. So no matter what it looks like, I just know that they'll always be there for me, like a person would, and I think that gives so much joy and life to the practice. So even if I'm pulling my hair out, and I probably don't see a lot of you all outside of this building because my studio is upstairs and I just am in there, and that's basically it. Come visit me though. But yeah, so it's this really, yeah. What were we talking about? Was there a question?
You answered.
Okay. Yeah. And that's the answer.
Yeah. Having a full life is just huge.
Yeah.
So purpose.
Yeah, and I think that's something that I've developed a long time ago when I was young. Probably out of trauma, but why would and it's something I've been unwavered about. I don't really let people in on the practice a lot or guide me or tell me what to do. It's just my space for that, and I've always had that. And I never came from academic background, so I just feel like that's just what it is, and that's what it will always be. And yeah, I wonder what happened from it now.
One thing I'd love to talk about a little bit is just the kind of place of sort of community in your work and the sort of ethos that you all seem to share, in just being really, just innately generous and inclusive. I'm thinking of in the show of your family, Martha, and also, included Alicia's work, and Alicia, when you and we're working on the exhibition at the Oakland Museum, the Fertile Ground show, and you and Ruby, it brought in all kinds of other, work from your own personal collections to expand, and then you did the Adobe Plate project, and then invited Muzae and other artists to participate. So there's there's that the solitary practice of working in the studio. And early in the pandemic, I was asking Wayne Tebow, who was approaching 100, how it was going, because it's such an isolating thing. And he said, I'm really just doing what I do every day. I just go to the studio, so it's not that different. But so there's the studio practice, but then also just how that has expanded out, at places like Gallery 16 and at Oakland here at Part 2, other places where you've been just have have made a really a clear. It's really clear the extent to which other artists matter too. I wonder if you just,
Yeah, just quickly on that note, I think, Alicia, you mentioned two things that really stuck with me early on. It was the notion of paintings being democratic and inclusive, and that really stuck with me because that's such a big part of making an image for me is, thinking of it as a guided meditation almost, where I'm giving a lot of information, but also allowing space for things to happen. And I think personally, you've been a mentor for a really long time, but not necessarily stylistically. It actually wasn't until we put all these works together that I was oh, we're actually on a very similar tip. But more so, out of anything, you've been a mentor as a community leader, and this kind of this testament to you don't have to lose your morals. You don't have to let go of those things that you really believe in and how you really feel about practice and community to be successful. Because before you see a lot of artists. Just however you see them. And a lot of people are so caught up in career and the rat race and where am I showing? What kind of cool galleries? How am I getting a leg up in the art world? And it can be really disheartening. I think that's another reason why I'm in Oakland in general, is because that didn't really exist here. It wasn't the forefront of everyone's mind when they're creating. And I just wanted to say, you're a huge inspiration on how to do that and maintain your dignity.
I guess the easiest way for me to say it is, I guess I'd just rather do it with people that I love and care about and love their work, and value is a very created situation, and I just never felt any other way about it, which was if I was given an opportunity to have a space to show my work, I saw how odd and unfair that was to most of everybody else. But so it wasn't really even that much of a intention, It just as painters, I guess, or I don't know, I spend a tremendous amount of time alone, and I just really like the idea of shared space and utilizing opportunities to get eyes on what the amazing things that not so many people are doing. So it's really kind of as simple as that. The idea of a solo show is just so false to me in a lot of ways. Like, there's so much behind that person that it takes to end up, and that's just the way I see it. And yeah, I would rather do this with other people than do it alone. Not that I'm afraid to be alone. It's not bad.
But there's there's something that's just so special about the fact that it's just underscores it, like we're all in it together, and there's just so much that can come out of that because just that innate sense of the importance of community.
Yeah, I mean, there's other places to go if you want a different experience too, So, I always find it so odd that friends of mine in other towns, like, they don't go to each other's studios because they feel like a competitiveness with, and that's, I one of my favorites. Like, there's room for all of it, if you ask me. There's room for all of it, and I've just kind of gone at this just sort of with my gut and my heart, and that's kind of the only way I know how to do it, So, until something else makes sense, then, this is it.
Yeah. How are things in West Marin, Martha?
They're good, but I have to bow out of this conversation because I'm not communal.
Family, you get tons of friends and stuff. You guys have the greatest party.
And didn't Alicia live on your porch at one point? That's generous.
That's true. I'm not ungenerous, but with my art, I just hide away.
Yeah. That's a comment that even through this aspect of reaching for community, at the end of the day, my practice is very isolating, lonely. You have to really make it, like the social aspect of it is almost another a different step, right? Like the harder part. Yeah, so my studio's here, so I have a lot of people around that are also making, and that's been really great, because otherwise I'd probably be a lot more isolated. So yeah, it's honestly like between community and art making, that's really it, right? Like, we spend time with other people and we create things, and we eat in between there and sleep, and that's the kind of sum of life for me. It's just like community practice.
I realize this show opened super recently, and some of the work is quite new. But I wonder if you might just tell us a little bit about what you have going on in the studio now. If there's anything.
Just projects, 2 city projects, but I don't want to talk about those.
But pretty exciting, right? So,
yeah,
Island, downtown Gibraltar.
It's exciting for the outsider. Yeah, you're like looking in. It's like probably really exciting. It's more stressful, and I'm stressed just thinking about it.
They do end up being an incredible gift to everyone, though. Like your Fox Theater,
right?
plays.
Yeah,
It's
also
just
very stressful. Yeah, it's just a beautiful thing, though. Like, it's just the best type of stress I could ever ask for. Yeah, this painting and projects, like Triple Capricorn, so I'm all about that life. Yeah, here to work on a project. Oh my gosh.
They're
We're opposite. Yeah.
astrologically.
Yeah. You know, the caring ones.
We're like,
I'm the ice.
the red and the green.
No, no, that means
Are those the primary opposites?
regular. Yeah.
Primary opposites. Am I green or are you red? Or
Doesn't matter. It's a triangle.
One day you're green, one day you're red.
Yeah.
There's a lot of words in there too from the museum.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I was gonna answer a question and then. No, you're talking about things going on. Yeah, just painting, stuff like that. Show. YMCA show.
I'm really excited about a show that Nancy's curated with me and Terry Dodge at the SF Arts Commission Gallery opening January-ish. Is that right? Yeah. So I'm really excited about that because that's a whole other kind of part of my personal history of the 90s and Terry Dodge and a whole other community of radical queer very creative types that have so many are gone on to do really amazing things. So to have that kind of circle kind of come back around is personally really just, and the fact that Nancy kind of is at the center of that is just another thing that makes me love being here and, kind of letting things go. Harry's been in LA for decades and, so I'm very excited about that.
What's happening in your studio these days, Monica?
Well, lots. We were talking about things circling around. I have lots of stuff circling around. I don't know if I can handle it all. But it's fun, and I have time now. So,
Like,
what they're working.
so yeah, we've got paintings.
Shocker.
Oh yeah.
Look forward
We
to
got a
seeing more of
Day Young show.
Yeah, I really encourage you to take a visit to. I'm gonna invite you without their permission to the shop compound. It will change your life.
So I can rent everybody or just
No regrets.
Yeah, we're all.
cool. Well,
Talk about a party.
Yeah.
What should we see if there's questions
Yeah.
from any of you all?
Next.
Yeah, brothers.
Should I stand? So I think earlier in the talk, you guys mentioned the SF Arts Institute as the alma mater, and I went there recently because it closed, and I was pretty moved to see the abandoned building and spray paint on the side was the saddest place in SF. But then I come to these talks and I feel really inspired and optimistic, and I'm just curious about, being really into the art scene. What are your predictions for the future of art in the Bay Area? And also just art in general. And I'm super curious about that because I don't know, as an aspiring artist myself, what the future is going to do that.
The future is what you make of it.
and how am I supposed to yeah, I guess going back to what we were saying, community. Even before all of this, it's I was just living in SF, connecting with my friends and doing whatever. I had no pretentious limit, showing at a coffee shop, showing wherever. I would go to shows and hang out with people similar to this. You meet people, you talk about your interests. You continue to go to the gallery, you make friends. They hit you up and like, hey, you want to do this random project? And then you're like, yeah, why not? I don't got anything else going on, and it's art, and this is cool. And literally, that's just how it all started. That's how it's still going. That's just like how I met Brock. I think you really have to invest in people before they can give you something. You know what I mean? Like, you really have to like be like, yo, I'm like with you, and like we're doing this, because that person that you might like be like, oh, I'm not gonna do a coffee shop show. Like 10 years from now, they could be at the museum curating, and then it's like you see your friend just passing you in the distance who doesn't even remember you because you never did that show with them or something like that. You thought that we could just bypass that step. So yeah, for me, it's like so much comes out of making work in the studio, and then after that is like, how do I connect it to community in some type of way? And a lot of that is like showing up, coming to things like this, showing up, talking to the people next to you. Like, I don't know if you know Adrian, he's a great person to talk to. You have the gallery. Like, like, it's just so simple. It can be so simple, but also it takes a lot of time, and time is something that I think shouldn't be a concern. I think you kind of just have to like be comfortable with the practice and kind of live with the possibility of never doing anything worth it. I think if you can live with that and continue your practice, you're already like 15 steps ahead of everyone else, So
No, you don't need all that. You don't need the outside affirmation or.
It's the icing on the cake. That's kind of how I see it. Like, things like this is like the icing. This is like super icing. This is like really, really good icing. But it's still like just the top. It's the cherries. Like, the real thing is what happens in the studio and in practice. Yeah.
Yeah, this question's for Muzae. It sounds like you had your studio in your house in Fairfax for a very long time.
Yeah.
And you've raised a number of children.
5.5.
Yeah. And how did you carve out space for your own like personal expression and have like all your maybe your pets and children and gardens and your chicken and like how did you like just keep your own practice going around that?
Perhaps that's what has made me so private, because I have to find a way to do it and find my own niche. Keep everyone out. Not very communal. That's the only answer.
Well, I'm not letting you go. Do you have to tell your family, okay, now it's artist time? Or did you have to like create a boundary around your art practice, or did you just kind of like sneak away and like go and sneak away?
Well, we built me a studio, so if I'm at the studio, they know that it's my time.
It was like an unspoken kind of rule that I remember. Like, you just don't go in Martha's studio. Like, this kind of amazing reference to. It was really fascinating for me because Richard's studio is in the basement, and it's much more. It's like the driveway leads into the studio, and Richard's is very gregarious and a teacher and always friends and family, and again, just from my outside perspective, it allows for and it was just like Martha's in her studio, and we just let it. It's just. I mean, I remember I was telling Janet this story remember when you guys went and drove? I think you were going to Foxes and we painted it when you actually went into your studio and put your paintings up in the main room, like as a surprise. And it was like one of the most terrifying things for all three of us to do. Virgil and Alice and I, we were just like terrified. We didn't know if she was gonna like it or not. And we were waiting, and Virgil and Alice and I were waiting in the kitchen, and we hear you guys coming up the front porch. And I go into the room, and Virgil and Alice weren't there. They bailed on me, and I'm like, oh my god! I was so scared. And you came in, and your mouth open. It was that like one moment where it's like, is it happy? Is she mad? It was like the longest suspended moment. It was like so terrifying in like the utmost respect. I mean, it was like
that big.
no, it was a very positive way. It was just like, again, it was just sort of like the respect of, yeah, it's just, I know that's amazing. I think the fight still exists to some extent, but just the respect for the artist studio, you know what I mean? I don't let people into my studio very often either, but because it's just so like very
Yeah, it's a vulnerable space, like letting people into. And I think I just wanted to add or say that, you know, we're talking a lot about this aspect of community and going past the studio practice and like connecting it to a sense of community. And I think that suits me and probably you. And it probably has to do with my past and notions of family and community and things like that, things that I'm striving for. But I also want to say that I don't think it's necessary for a practice. Like, you can have a practice that's private. You can have a practice that is you creating your own space, and it's like still very valid in the sense, like, you know, everyone defines their own practice and how it looks and how it serves them in their life. And that's why I think that everyone should have some sort of practice, like whatever it is. Like, if you need to carve that space, carve that space. And it's a place where you can be the boss. You know, you have everything is under your terms and your control. I think that's so necessary for living a life where you don't have that control outside of the studio, and you kind of have to let things in life just be, so that you can function in them like happily and fulfilled. And you know, I have a lot of control in my studio, and I put all of that need to control and need to be particular in my practice, so that when I go out into the world, I can be more free of the person. And I think that is just how I look at practice, and I think everyone can like have a different type of practice that like fulfills whatever they need. And if you need space, you need to carve out space, and you don't want to show anyone. There's a lot of stuff that I do that I don't show anyone, you know. Probably because I show people my paintings and I don't show people other things that I do. Yeah, first, you know, I want that space, that private space, sometimes. So yeah, I just wanted to like say that, because I don't know if anyone out here is thinking like, oh, I need to like be social, like super social in order to have a practice. Like, you know, you can really do anything. Right.
Yeah. You know, like, organize, make your own rules.
Yeah, I mean, that's the best part. Like, you don't have a boss. Like, you can say what's right. That's why talking about art for me is like super simple, because like whatever it's like, I make the rules. So it's like, what are you gonna say no when I talk about a painting? Like, whatever. Yeah. So I don't know. Yeah, practice is important, and I hope everyone has a practice. Takes care of everyone makes art and lives a happy, healthy life.
Wow.
Don't laugh. Don't stop.
I have a quick one from Muzae and everyone else if you want to respond to it. But
I was really excited to see that this talk was happening because I think you're so clear in the way that you think about your paintings and your practice, and I love just listening to it. But it's something that we have been thinking about recently is space, and so I was kind of inspired to hear you talk about the space of the canvas, the space of your paintings. I'm kind of just curious if you want to talk a little bit more about that and address maybe how much of your practice is about keeping up space and establishing space.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think we'll start with saying I think any notion of clarity is probably a sham. I mean, I think I can talk about it, but that's just kind of because of what I was just saying. Is like it's my space to do those things. So I feel clear in that sense of knowing that it's like feeling very comfortable with it being my space to talk to God. You know, how that comes together in the studio private is like not as clear and it can be tumultuous, but yeah, taking up space, I think that's super interesting and something I've thought about, but I guess I'm now thinking about it in a different way now that you've asked that question, because my approach to painting, I remember being a kid and seeing like Picasso's and Matisse's for the first time in like a magazine, and my thought was just, I can do that. Like literally that thing of like, oh, my kid can make that. Instead of my parents saying that, I just said that, and then I tried to make it, and I didn't try to copy them. I just tried to. I was like, oh, let me make my own version, you know, and I would put them up in my space because we didn't have any money, and obviously I didn't really have any art in my house, so I would just like make my own things, and so in that sense, you know, there is a sense of taking up space that happens like with having a show and like this aspect of art making. I don't know if I'm giving space.
Yeah.
I guess I am taking it up, but also like
in terms of claiming it.
Yeah. I'd like to think of it as like more so providing a space to be activated. This room, some of the stuff is a little bit more direct. I've been moving into more of a direct representation with some things because sometimes I just want to paint a boat coming into a harbor. And that's that. And, you know, I named that piece Port City because I still wanted to give this like vague reference to space. But, you know, this one's called Ashley Flea. This is like my old balcony. All of those other paintings are like direct spaces. But I want to like, you know, give people space to really think about it in their own way and navigate the dimensionality in their own way. There's some paintings that are way less direct and more from skewed perspective. So I'm like, my belief is that while you're viewing the work and making sense of it, you're actually putting yourself into the painting and navigating it in a way that suits your history and your way of, you know, just thinking in general. One of my favorite things is hearing people tell me what they see. You know, like, it doesn't really happen so much anymore because I think people are a little bit shy to tell me the truth. But there's been times where, like, maybe they didn't know I was the artist and I'm like overhearing conversations when it's still fun. But yeah, like hearing people like be like, oh, this reminds me of my grandma's house, and like these are the stairs that went up to this thing, and sometimes like people see this one little thing and think the whole painting's about this one like section or one, you know, and it just is such a reflection of them that it makes me feel really happy that they're having that moment of reflection. And also when they see new things, when people come to me like, oh, I've been looking at this for so long, and then they see this new thing, and I'm like, I didn't even see that. That's really love. So yeah, those aspects, I guess, of taking space, I never really thought of it that way, but I'm liking more thinking of it as like taking space to give space. Yeah. Yeah. That was like.
I have a question. I don't know if you missed this earlier, but how much do you think, how many pieces did you make after you did you do a short cover and also the download the two where I started like subconscious or conscious made into pieces that sort of reflected the fact that it'd be like switching away.
Them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry. Due to well, I thought about both of them and showing. I don't know. Did you ask the question?
I did.
But again, I kind of, as Janet sort of pointed out, like I come with a bit of a embarrassingly short list of sort of images that I'm kind of still grappling with, or just so. And so for me, I kind of thought about size, image, color with both of them. But I mean, I finished a lot of the work. I mean, I made most of the work just a short amount of weeks before the, and I was painting them up until the opening, which is not. It doesn't matter if you give me a year or like. For some reason, it's just like always up to the last minute, and in an enjoyable way that or something. So yeah, I thought about the two of them, and I think also because they work in such kind of specific series, and that it was just kind of trying to figure out. And to be honest, I didn't know if it was what was gonna. It took us a little while to kind of figure out the room. That's always a dance. At least again for me, I think there are a lot of people that are pre-plan and trying to achieve something specific in terms of like a theme or a title, but I do my best to avoid all of that and just stick with the same short list. And so yeah, that was I think it was probably me kind of fitting into these guys.
Yeah, I think typically I am a planner. I'm like trying to know what I want to make and love drawing, and I'm like, okay, this is typically if I was doing a show like a solo exhibition, I would figure in like the series or story. Like this show was super organic and like really was an eye-opening like way of just being like, okay, you know, it doesn't have to be so organized in that way. And I mean, it was super fun just putting the pieces in the room and deciding who's staying and who's going. You know, like I had most of these done already, and some other ones that could have gone, so we could like pull from and make pairings. And once we put the pieces into the room together, it just fell right together. Like it was really a charming experience to see how everything kind of has a little conversation with each other, and
and to have that meet sort of at least jurors. But I mean, Martha came and visited the space when her work had arrived, and again, it's kind of just Brock and everybody here just kind of set such an amazing tone that allows for things to kind of find their own sort of sifted comfort or discomfort zone, and so, and again, I think that's one of the commonalities is that the work stems from such a kind of sincere place that I think, you can't really hide that in the way that everybody in their own individual way works with the materials and sort of,
So you could
comes to that end result with with all the elements. So
And-
yeah.
Yeah, it was really dreamy in that way, and we talked about this a lot about Reed, of just kind of his floatiness of
Yeah.
moving through the three spaces.
Yeah, so the last week I was literally like, the gallery was my studio, and so it allows for, it's something I enjoy because I want to get a feel for the space as much as possible, and kind of like integrate sort of the intimacy of the studio and, the kind of general coldness of any white box display area. And I think that's just something that is part of, if possible, and most of the times it is. I just find, again, it's much like the Sika, like painting that giant plexiglass piece there. I had an idea of how I wanted to, the sort of, sorry, I had the idea of painting, carving back in, and that mark making, but while doing it, and the crew being around, I was like, oh, now I know what that mark is going to be. It's going to be the initials of everybody that had any hand in this, and you were the first one that came, and because that was right when we were just getting to know each other, yeah, and that, again, that was just like one of the best things ever, was like seeing like just all the crew and the curators. It's just you put a spray can in anybody's hand, especially those that haven't seen, and there's just the most amazing sort of happy, devious smile that gets on people's faces. So it's sort of, that's a good example of how things kind of come to be. You kind of go in, again, sort of just kind of trusting that it's going to figure itself out,
Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to talk about that moment really quick, where you asked a bunch of art handlers at SFMOMA to carve their name into
they're supposed to not do, yeah.
that you're working on. Everyone was like, yeah, thanks. Are you sure?
Yeah, I had to.
I was like, yeah, she gave it.
Well, I know, and then I left. I was like, everybody's just too weird because I was there. So I left. I think I was like, I have to go do something. And then when I came back like 15 minutes later, it's just like, 15 people all over. This is good, amazing.
So cool.
And again, that they work in this space and that they never, it's all invisible, which is how everything works. But just the idea of them having a moment of like being seen in one of those spaces in a sort of permanent or temporarily, it was a neat, and again, that came up that week of installing. So,
just pop.
Super special. Anything else that any of you want to share with the group before we let people get on with their days?
Yeah. I don't think so. If you guys ask me a question after, if you want.
Cool. Well, thank you guys. Thank you, Janet.